Let's go ahead and get started. Good to see everyone this morning. We'll begin our June 17th staff briefing for Tuesday. And first up, we have Sarah Rodas speaking to us about various boards, like that, various boards and commission appointments. We heard Commissioner Kerr talk a little bit earlier too, and a big thanks to Sarah for sending us the date range as well. So.
Computer decide to update right now.
Oh, just. All right, so with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah, and it's great to see Mike here as well, too.
Wonderful. We have two boards that we need to fill some vacancies on. First up is the Jefferson County Corrections Board. Because Kiara resigned from the Jefferson Center for Mental Health, she no longer will serve on that board, and they are recommending Sarah Alquist take that position. Any questions or?
Go ahead.
Just as a reminder to the public, Sarah Alquist is the new Executive Director and CEO, President and CEO of the Jefferson Center for Mental Health.
Thank you very much. Everyone in support?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. All three in support.
All right, next up is the Budget Retention Advisory Committee. We did receive 12 or 13 applications, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike to talk through the recommendations if you have any questions.
Thank you. So you've got the list of people that we recommended in front of you, but just to provide a little bit of background on how we got here. We have one of the requirements we talked about, and that's why it's listed here as a criteria category, where the district's trying to at least a couple of people from each district included, but then also the two members who would be ex officio members, the chair of the audit committee and the chair of the budget advisory committee. Each committee was given the option to pick somebody else from that group, but they did both select the chair. So after we got those applications, we had the Budget Retention Internal Steering Committee work through that to come up with these recommendations. So it's not from our team, it's from that committee. They had a subcommittee to draft that up and then reviewed it as the full group. So this set of recommendations is from them. Just a couple of things you see that might need some explanation. The terms for those two members who were the chairs, we've set up the staggered terms so that we can start to have a more regular application schedule and not be trying to do the whole board at once in future years. But we lined those two up with their with the terms for their chair. So that's why they have those slots.
It's a great list, and we have 9 total, right? So important to have that odd number in case, votes come out differently. I am thrilled to see the names that are on this list who really bring a diverse background and relevant background to the work. So of course, just to remind everyone, the Board of County Commissioners, with our team's help, will submit recommendations to them in the direction we'd like to go, and then ask them for any feedback or issues that may come up that we should consider, but we'll take the lead in providing those recommendations on the 1A dollars. Commissioners, do you have any questions about anyone who has applied? Do you have any different perspectives than the folks who've been recommended? It's a really great list. Looks like we've got 2 in every single district, Mike, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it was a really great set of applicants. So it didn't make the steering committee's job easy, but
Just the only thing, knowing some of the people who, I don't want to say didn't make the cut because that doesn't portray what I'm trying to say, but we really appreciate every single person who stepped forward here. And there's just no way of getting, we can't make every boarding commission as big as the people who are volunteering. Definitely one more plug for other boards and commissions. Those applications will be open July 1st through July 29th. So please, if and we always say this through the boards and commissions, if you weren't selected on the board or commission that you applied for, please look around. We have over 30 boards and commissions, and some of them get more applications than we can accept, and some don't get enough. So we definitely want to thank every single person who put their name forward and strongly encourage all of them to continue applying for boards and commissions. And with that, my computer maybe is done updating and I can use my own computer now.
All in support?
I'm so
Great. And Mike, just a special shout out to you and the Budget Retention Internal Steering Committee for the hard work, and also to Sarah, who's helping us coordinate this huge effort around boards and commissions. Thank you both for being here this morning. Thank you for your work. Next up, we have development and transportation, and we've got 3 items involving housing, airport property, and more. So we'll start first with welcome back.
Thank you.
Abel Montoya. And we have Chris O'Keefe, and is Heather here as well?
Yes, he is.
Okay. We're doing housing first, right?
Correct. That's
Okay, perfect. So Mel, if you all want to come forward and let's just do a round of introductions. Be great.
My name is Abel Montoya. I'm the Director of Development and Transportation for Jefferson County.
I'm Chris O'Keefe, the Planning and Zoning Director for Jefferson County.
I'm Heather Gutherlist, the Long Range Planning Supervisor for Jefferson County.
Tutu Charmwell, we're long range planner for Jefferson County. And Chrissy Lane, Transportation Operations and Planning Manager.
Great to see you all. Turn it over to Abel.
Thank you. Commissioners, today we want to share with you information about planning for additional housing in Jefferson County. As you know, housing is a very important topic over the last decade and continues to be, both in supply and the affordability. And so we wanted to share some highlights with you on the work we're doing moving forward as part of a discussion. There's some elements that we would be bringing back to you at a future date, either through executive session or continued dialogue through briefings. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Heather, and she's going to dive right in.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a presentation for you today, and myself and Touche will be presenting some of the slides. We have a lot of things to talk about regarding housing with this. We're going to cover a few different topics, but with the next slide, we're going to show how we're trying to tie this all together kind of with the 15-year housing strategic plan. But then we also wanted to look at the transit-oriented communities bill that was passed last year and look at some potential initiatives and tools, and then also leave plenty of time, hopefully, for any questions and answers.
And Val and Heather, just to clarify what you need from the Board of County Commissioners, today you're simply providing an update on these different components, which we appreciate very much because it's been an important part of our work moving forward. How does all this fit with the different housing plans that we've been working on, and how's that reflected in Together Jeffco? But we are not necessarily voting on anything. We're simply going to have a conversation. We may have questions, may get a little bit of direction from us, but we'll come back at a later time for any sort of regulatory or policy changes, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And so first I want to set the stage. With the next slide, we start talking about the affordable housing need. With, I'm sure you hear public comments. I know I hear public comments about concerns about growth in the county, but there are studies that show that we do have a housing need both for the Denver metro region and for Jefferson County. In 2024, DRCOG did a housing needs assessment, and they showed that the region as a whole, this does include 8 counties, but the region as a whole needs to build another 511,000 more units in order to meet the current and future needs of the area. With the next slide, it shows how.
Ask a question about that statistic. That includes all of the municipalities, all of Jefferson County, right? Not just the unincorporated areas, but all of Jefferson County?
It includes the entire region. So not just Jefferson County, but also Douglas County, Boulder County, all the DRCOG municipalities, all the cities within like Boulder, Douglas, El Paso. I'm trying to remember all of the counties in DRCOG, Clear Creek, Gilpin, Adams, Arapahoe, Denver. So it's a very large area. Yeah.
So
Just clarify.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not talking about 511,000 is. the
In
need.
Morrison,
In
yeah.
Jefferson.
Right. population of
Yes. Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
slide though.
We thought we had our work cut out for us.
Good segue into our next slide where we drill down a little bit more into Jefferson County and unincorporated Jefferson County. The Community Development Division did a housing needs assessment for Jefferson County in conjunction with the Housing Strategic Plan. And that needs assessment showed that Jefferson County as a whole, we are looking at needing 2,700 units per year to be built, or approximately 41,000 by 2040. That is the entire county. That includes our municipalities like Arvada and Lakewood. However, unincorporated does need to include our share of housing units, and that would be about another 880 units per year. And which would be about, actually, I shouldn't say another, that would included in that number is our portion is about 880 units per year, or 13,200 units by 2040. So that is an increase over what our historic annual production is by about 400, 500 units. So that is something that we need to look at. So that kind of sets the stage as far as the need that's in both the metro region and Jefferson County. In the next slide, we are going to start talking about the housing strategic plan and the housing crosswalk. And I know that some of this was presented, well, all of this was presented at the elected officials and personnel board meeting last week, but I do want to go over it still briefly for any members of the public that might need to be brought up to speed. The 15-year housing strategic plan looks at housing needs across the full spectrum of housing in the county, from homelessness to market rate homeownership. And this plan was adopted in February and is also guided by the Jefferson County Blueprint. We also have been corresponding with that plan with the Together Jeffco process and incorporating and wanting to make sure that we are really tight with looking at the comprehensive plan and the transportation mobility plan and our regulation updates that are coming together. So we've been working really closely on that. And if you want to go to the next slide, there is.
I'm sorry, would you remind us, CP stands for?
Oh, yes, sorry. CP is comprehensive plan. TMP is transportation mobility plan. And ULUC, ULUC is our unified land use code. Doesn't exist right now. Right now we have our land development regulations and our zoning regulations. But we'll be combining those into one document. Thank you. I meant to say that.
Perfect, thanks.
So with the comprehensive plan or comp plan, we wanted to make sure that housing was pulled out as a key element in the plan. Right now, housing is under all of our other land uses, but because it is something that we really saw a need for and got a lot of comments on, we specifically pulled out a section and a chapter related just to housing. And if you go to the next slide, it will show how we wanted to correlate the strategies, the key goals of the 15-year housing plan with the comprehensive plan. And the goals, one of the housing goals in the comprehensive plan specifically talks about workforce and affordable housing. We also talked about a few other things, such as the location of housing, make sure they're sustainable. We do want to make sure that especially higher density housing or affordable housing is put in locations that are close to transit, close to services, have good water supply and availability, and don't have as many hazards. And is there a question?
Yes, Commissioner.
So I just wanted to compliment you. I know that that is a departure from current practice when we put together comprehensive plans. So very rarely do we focus so intensely on housing in our comp plans. And so I just wanted to say thank you for highlighting that, doubling down, and making that a greater focus in this comp plan. I don't think people, members of the public generally understand that this is not necessarily a component of a comprehensive plan. And so I wanted to highlight and uplift that and just say great work.
Thanks. It was really incredible to have the housing plan being updated and created at the same time as the comprehensive plan and the rest of the Together Jeffco plans. Excuse me. because we were really able to work much more closely than we usually do. So it was a great opportunity. Okay, with the next slide, I want to very briefly talk about even going a little bit deeper. One of the new chapters that we're proposing with our comprehensive plan is an implementation chapter. And in that implementation chapter, we have initiatives that relate to each of our chapters. So we have an affordable housing initiative specifically, where there are some key actions to support affordable housing in the county in the future. One of those that I want to point out is to update the land use code based on the 15-year housing plan recommendations and best practices. And with the next slide, it shows a lot of the more specific key actions that the housing plan recommended be incorporated into our regulations. Some of those things include modifying our accessory dwelling unit regulations, having more land zoned for multifamily, and preserving and implementing mobile homes. With the next slide, while I've mainly been talking about Together Jeffco and the things that Planning and Zoning or Department of Development and Transportation have been doing, we also have been going out and talking to the various county departments and offices and asking them to look at the housing plan. We created a crosswalk, which is basically a spreadsheet that shows on the left column is the housing plan and the strategies and key actions that are listed in there. And then with the other columns, we asked that the different departments look at how their programs might relate to those key strategies or action items, and how not just planning and zoning and development and transportation can support housing, but also other departments throughout the county can support these. We got some great feedback so far of different ways that different departments might be able to stretch themselves, because a lot of times they might not deal with housing specifically. But like the county manager's office came back with engaging urban renewal authorities to support the development of urban renewal plan areas that promote affordable housing. Our human resources talked about exploring incentive opportunities for employees in the county to preserve housing opportunities and support public sector employees who sometimes live outside the county due to costs. So really great feedback that we received about how we could all support housing.
I just want to take a moment to underscore this as well and share much gratitude, because I know one of the things we work so hard on is to break down silos across the county. And that has been a continued effort in the several years I've served on the board. And I think this really speaks very clearly to how we address this issue across the entire organization. And really appreciate your highlighting that and also reaching out to the departments so we can think more comprehensively and strategically.
And I would like to echo that. I hate it when we come up with great plans and do subcommittees and come up with strategic initiatives, and then they just sit on a shelf and are never implemented or enacted. So I think this is a way of making sure that our plan is moving forward and that everybody's working toward it. And then a comment that I made during our last presentation at the elected officials and personnel board that I would like to repeat is that I really see this as 3 different circles or spheres of influence. The first sphere being internal to our own agency, our own organization, Jefferson County, and our employees, and how does that interface? And then the second is really about our service delivery, the mission and vision of your specific department and how we go about doing that work. And then the third sphere of influence is really how that impacts the greater community. It may be directly or indirectly through the initiatives of these different spheres. So I don't think that unless we are conscious about it and deliberate about it, that it would just happen. And so I'm really excited that we are engaging in this exercise, and then hopefully it will help us implement our housing plan more actively.
So with the next slide, this helps us transition to our next topic about transit-oriented communities. With the comprehensive plan, we coordinated closely with the Transportation Mobility Plan to look at areas where more density intensity is most appropriate. And basically, this slide is just trying to convey that really based on transit networks and transportation networks, hazards, where population growth we see occurring, really a lot of our growth is being focused on the plains areas of the county because they do have better services, better infrastructure, fewer hazards. With the next slide, we wanted to focus a little bit more, just show you an example of how we coordinated in the South Golden Road area. And this is going to be a topic that we'll come back to as we talk about the transit-oriented communities. South Golden Road Corridor is designated as a transit area in the state statute. And really, we were looking at the South Golden Road area for increased density and intensity, maybe not as much as the state is requiring, but I just want to emphasize that we do look at these transit corridors for increased density, that the state, I think, is pushing us a little bit more. So let's get into the state requirements with the next slide. The House Bill 24-1313 was passed last year, and it's regarding transit-oriented communities. And it requires an increased density in specific transit areas. And those are shown very generally in the map in the pink areas. So this is all Jefferson County. We only need to consider the areas that are not grayed out because the grayed out areas are within the cities. The transit areas are transit corridor areas that are quarter mile from high frequency bus routes. Those are bus routes which during peak hours run every 15 minutes or greater. And then transit station areas, a half mile within those transit station areas are also part of the transit areas. In those areas, state statute says that our zoning capacity must allow an average of 40 dwelling units per acre or a minimum of 15 dwelling units per acre, or I should say, and a minimum of 15 dwelling units per acre. Now, the zoning capacity is the allowed density under zoning. And I don't know if there's a way to minimize this a little bit more or scroll up on this slide, but the zoning capacity is the allowed density under zoning. That doesn't mean it has to necessarily be built out to that amount. If developers look at the site and maybe they are struggling with water issues or transportation issues, then we still, as a county and as a developer, they still need to meet all of our standards to be able to meet that maximum density. But we do want to, the state did want to have the ability to allow up to that average of 40 dwelling units per acre. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Can I ask a question? So there would be no consequences or penalties if we did not meet that standard. It would only be if we prohibited that standard. Is that correct?
We need,
That's correct.
we have to allow it by zoning. We don't necessarily have to build it.
Because we can't dictate to developers their product or what they want to come forward with, or we can limit it up to that standard. But the market will mostly dictate what ends up happening in these corridors. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and with the next slide, why do we want to comply? So one of the things, it is something that with the comp plan update, we are looking at where we can support additional housing and increase these densities where we may not have done that with past plans. But also, if we comply, we might be eligible for some additional grant funding through the Transit-Oriented Communities Infrastructure Grant Program or other state grant programs. We might receive priority. So there could be incentives for the county to, beyond meeting our housing needs, to complying with this regulation. Also on this slide, wanted to highlight some deadlines. One is quickly approaching, and that's why we're briefing you today. We wanted to kind of give you an update before we make our submittal with our preliminary HOG report due to DOLA and our information about current zoning in these transit areas. That's due at the end of this month. Then a year and a half later, we will be required to do our final HOG report and also identify our transit centers. So at this point in time, we're not looking at specific locations where we're going to have zoning for increased density. We just need to submit to DOLA what are our housing opportunity goals or HOG. And then a year later, we have to identify those final transit centers, and the zoning capacity has to meet the HOG. So that means we need to actually have rezoned the properties to increase the density. With the next slide,
Can I ask a quick question about
Yeah.
that? So, do you anticipate, given that we will likely have to do some rezonings, that timeline is doable for us?
right now, I think with the year and a half, it would be,
Okay.
yeah.
And
And it,
if
I was-
not, is there an ability to request an extension through DOLA or?
that is a good question. I am not quite sure, but I know that when I was recently talking to DOLA, they seem very flexible. They want to help us meet these requirements as we can. I know with this first deadline, they were they want to see what we have. It's basically like a check-in. They want to see what we're doing. We don't necessarily have to have everything nailed down. So they have been pretty open to working with communities, which has
That's
been
good.
nice.
All right, thank you.
And I have a quick follow-up question too regarding the federal, what we're seeing on a federal level in terms of federal funding that is at stake, as well as at the state level and the cuts to the budget. Do we know yet whether we may see any changes with the transit-oriented communities infrastructure fund grant? Or as far as we know, that's pretty solid and we can count on it?
Yeah, we're not aware of any proposed changes.
That was my bill, by the way. It was coupled with the LIHTC for Chafa.
Awesome.
So,
So that's one at least we think we can count on
yes.
it. Okay, good. Thank you.
That's state funding that has already been approved and is in there, was not touched in the most recent budget
Perfect.
cuts.
Thank you.
So,
So going back to the housing opportunity goal, when we initially looked at the housing opportunity goal, we were looking at approximately 1,500 acres, 60,000 units, and about 153,000 more people. I thought that included more exemptions than it did. Turns out it didn't include any exemptions. So that was just everywhere in those areas. And so it looked pretty extreme. Since then, I've had conversations with DOLA. Thank you, Commissioner Zenzinger, for making that connection. It was extremely helpful.
okay.
We talked with them, and the next slide goes through a lot of the exemptions. And we did some calculations recently, and DOLA actually helped us a lot with the calculations that we have been then verifying their work. But all of these different exemptions that we have, agricultural and open space zoning was about 250 acres of exemptions. Rights of way were about 270 acres of exemptions. So really, we were able to get that down. And on the next slide, we have, it's almost been reduced by over half, about 700 acres now in our transit areas that are not including those exempt areas. So that's what we actually need to base our housing opportunity goal on. And that would be more like 28,000 acres or 71,000 people. It's still it's still a lot, but that 28,000 units also includes any units that are already existing. So any higher density areas that already exist can be included in that 28,000.
So not
units.
new necessarily.
Correct. Additionally, talking with DOLA, there is another area that we are going to request an exemption, and that is for the South Golden Road area. And I'm not sure if that's the next slide. It is not quite the next slide. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a future slide, but there is an opportunity for an additional exemption. We need to apply for that by June 30th and see if DOLA will grant that within 90 days.
And what is that based on?
So the South Golden Road area is not an enclave. It's not entirely surrounded.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because my concern was that, well, we're actually like, if we can make it work, South Golden Road Corridor is an area where we've looked at increased densities. If we ask for and get an exemption, could we still make that a transit center? DOLA said you could, so it's almost like a win-win situation where we can reduce our overall housing opportunity growth numbers, create more flexibility for ourselves in where this density goes, but also use an area that could be appropriate for more density to meet those goals.
I'm confused though what the transit is, like. What,
Along South Golden Road,
yeah, what is the transit?
there is a bus line that operates every 15 minutes or more during peak hours along South Golden Road. I think it's the 16
Yeah.
X or L.
Yeah, and it's actually not just during peak hours. South Golden Road is a 15-minute
Oh.
away all day long.
Okay,
That's good to know.
thank you.
So also with the next slide, DOLA has outlined in their guidance that there are a lot of different options for how we can meet this housing opportunity goal. We can look at the entire transit area and the transit station area, but they've also included a bonus buffer, and that's another quarter mile on either side of the transit area. So we could look at spreading that density out and doing like an overall increased density to 20 dwelling units per acre throughout that area. Or on the next slide, they show another option of being able to heavily concentrate density in certain areas, maybe making these transit centers 80 dwelling units per acre. And then the rest of it around that would be left as is. Or the third option on the next slide shows that you could do a little bit of both. You could have some really intense areas and then some less intense areas, and use some of that bonus buffer area, not use some of the bonus buffer area. So there are a lot of different options that will be very helpful in determining where these transit centers are. Next slide. Some other considerations, another thing that will help us is optional transit areas. That we have transit areas that we have to have our HOG calculation based on. But then we can also increase densities in transit buffers, which I showed before. And then there are also optional transit areas. And these optional transit areas are areas where they didn't designate them, but it also has decent transit service that we can look at putting our centers in those areas. Some other considerations, and I heard the public comment this morning from Ms. Clemens talking about water supply and transportation capacity. And those are important factors in this consideration of where to put these transit centers. With water supply, we will be reaching out to the water providers with our full draft of the comprehensive plan to get them to start thinking about whether they have capacity to serve some of these areas and our potential increased density. And then with transportation capacity, that is also something we need to look at as we designate these transportation corridors. One area, actually the only area in these transit areas that is county owned and maintained is the South Golden Road Corridor. And so that is an area that I have a slide on coming up. We're going to be focusing on a study for that area. We'll talk about that more in a little bit.
So that's the only area?
Yeah, so there
That
are
is two pink lines
2 pink lines.
on the map.
So that's the only corridor that the roadway is owned and maintained by the county.
Owned and maintained.
So,
county.
yeah,
Got it.
there are other ones like Colfax.
Yeah.
That's CDOT. Ward Road is CDOT. 52nd is actually Wheat Ridge.
Got it.
So we're gonna need to make sure that we coordinate with other jurisdictions as we go through this process to make sure that there is capacity for increased density on those roadways as well.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. Okay, so been talking a lot about South Golden Road corridor, and that's on the next slide. This is, like I said, this is an area where we have been looking at increased densities. We mainly looked at increasing intensity of commercial uses because of NRail wanting to promote maybe some businesses, small businesses to pop up because of NRail. But then also there's housing needs for people working in those sectors. And so the South Golden Road corridor is could be a good potential for a transit center where we could increase some density. So we're looking at that. But like I was saying, this next slide shows the need to look at the transportation in this area. And that's why Christina Lane is here to answer questions about the South Golden Road corridor. But Transportation Engineering has submitted a request for proposal for a capacity study along South Golden Road. That capacity study would look at the densities proposed and whether that could be supported along with the commercial densities proposed, because it seems like one or the other, commercial or, I'm looking at Christina, but it seems like one or the other might be able to be supported, but you add them both together, and that's where we start needing to have this study to see if they can be supported.
I have to say, I am especially excited about what development could potentially look like along South Golden Road and that corridor, because just before you all joined the board, and it might have even been back when Casey and Libby were on the board, we had approved that first development that was a mix of residential and commercial that is now up. It's a great development. And we talked a little bit about how, as a county, we would address the capacity issue, because I do think that is a very exciting, potentially exciting, vibrant corridor. The other piece too is working with that community as the corridor evolves, because it's a potentially very different than what the community has come to know. And I'm wondering, could you just touch a little bit more on what the potential strategies could be to address that capacity, knowing that we have a study in the works, but kind of thinking ahead if there are any thoughts you have on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one, the main thing is, of course, the study is understanding exactly, like Heather mentioned, is what's the capacity of this corridor and its ultimate condition, and then what's that balance, recognizing that, yes, the comp plan to date has really highlighted that need for commercial zoning in here with the commercial mixed use. But we know that our commercial districts generate far more trips than housing. So finding that balance is going to be really important. I will say, like the development that I believe that you're referencing, Commissioner Dahlkemper, is the one at South Golden Road in Rogers. And that is actually a perfect example of a 40 per acre mixed use commercial building. It is almost 40 units per acre, exactly.
Which would count.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like that building, but it's like, oh, this is dark house, right? So by having this corridor study completed, the next phase of this will be a full design of the corridor. We actually have this budgeted as a capital project right now. We've been kind of anticipating this even before 1313 with the development that we've seen from along the corridor. We knew that we were going to have to analyze this and understand exactly, so that when we come to you all for a rezone case, that we can confidently state, yes, this development can be absorbed by this corridor. So that's one component. Once we have design, there's obviously the aspect of this being a major capital project for Transportation and Engineering and Road and Bridge, but then also having the opportunity that once we have a design in place, as development starts to come in through the corridor, we can obviously take those traffic impact fees and then the public improvements associated with the impacts that must be mitigated by development, can start incorporating those into the corridor as well. The other component of this study is that we know that we're talking about something that's coming a quarter mile off the corridor. South Golden Road isn't going to be the only corridor impacted by this level of density. So in this study, we're actually doing an area study as well that will hone in on a variety of intersections in this neighborhood that are existing, but then also thinking through, if we get more of those REVA lot developments where you have 5 big properties combining, say, for example, I think 9th Avenue is an easy one to reference, where 9th kind of stops at Nile, and then you have all these like kind of bigger old ag lots, that if those combined, we need to clearly have a plan that states 9th needs to carry all the way through. We need to get that right of way to make the entire network in this community really function and operate efficiently. So we're looking at it from a variety of ways. Once we have this defined, then as development comes through, we'll be able to acquire the right of way, get the public improvements at that time, and kind of start planning this neighborhood more holistically.
Excellent. Thank you.
So I was just here this weekend in order to participate on that hike up to South Table Mountain, and we accessed it through the Camp George West Community Park there, the Pleasant View Community Park there, went up the hike. So I just had the opportunity. And coming from off of I-70, it's actually very counterintuitive because you have to go the opposite direction. You have to go east off of I-70, go along essentially Colfax, and then under I-70 to proceed west. And I'm just wondering if there is any anticipation or a conversation that we have had around a better exit into that transit corridor, because if we're increasing the density, that is a real roundabout way of getting into that community and quite complex. And in fact, I took 2 wrong turns and ended up in an industrial park in a neighborhood. So I'm just wondering about that in the future.
So Mike, Director of Transportation Engineering. So that was actually brought up when Glow Park was coming through. And it's been a thorn in my butt for a long time. And I think told me nuts that you can't connect from Denver West.
Yeah.
So during that process, I actually had our engineers design a road connection to Moss Road, which would be a direct route through Glow Park and through the Moss Road, which makes by far more sense.
Oh, yeah.
And at first, the Enrail group or whatever, they were kind of against it. They said, absolutely not. And what are you doing? But then actually the reality hit that how are they going to get business in there? You want direct access, you know? So I think it's been a win-win as we progress through that process. Hopefully it'll happen, but there would be a really great, there's a design, there's a preliminary design done on it. They all bought off on it. I'm hoping that does connect in, because you're right. How do you get people out of there? You know, you had to, and plus CDOT, one of the factors we'll find out, CDOT's gonna replace that bridge there. Well, most likely, in that segment, Camp George is gonna become a minor arterial, which means we need a bigger road.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to get the study ahead of that to show CDOT, hey, we need this widened, so now build our standard here. And that's a real fast, we heard they're gonna look at that bridge. If you look under it, you drive under, you'll see Caribbean underneath.
Oh, I did.
The tank farm.
I'll look up under that bridge.
So there's a lot, that bridge is not in good condition, so that allows us to keep this corridor going the way we think it should be going. So I think it's gonna be it's a good observation, I will say, because that's what my problem was, like, all those people are gonna go this way.
No.
And it actually literally clogs up the roundabout, which has been designed to handle a higher capacity, but the real need is this connector.
In full disclosure, I was trying to follow Google Maps and I ignored the first directions because I thought, well, that doesn't make sense. So I turned right, expecting to be able to take Denver West. And then they were like, nope, go around. And I was like, what? Also, I will say, they called it I-70 service road or something, not Colfax. And so I had no idea that these were the same thing. I was like, what? How can this, like a I-70 frontage road? And so it was very confusing for someone that had never traveled in that area before, going that direction. So, and then secondly, do we know what the future plans are for the Camp George West?
The nationally registered historic district. Our plan is carrying on area plans later on. I think we will going to focus in North Plains, Plains area plans more detailedly for specific areas.
And at that point, I think we want to coordinate with the Camp George West.
Yeah.
The federal government and state to see what the plans are for that.
Because it feels a bit in flux.
There's
It's the future.
several layers here. It all back to the Glow Park, and this was all just transferred between us and REL. We got a bunch of new parkland, which you hiked through.
I did.
Or in that area, there will be a new trailhead up there, and yeah, and we were also supposed to all go to take down the barbed wire thing, like over a year ago, which never happened. So, yeah, but it is no longer a prison, it won't be a prison.
Yes.
But there's a lot of historical stuff there that's pretty interesting.
When we did the Glow Park tour, where they did that presentation, we went into the old barracks and they were using those or planning to use those as the lesser expensive space for incubation.
Commercial development.
Because if someone couldn't afford the more expensive space at Glow Park, this would still be a great place where they could innovate and have people from NREL come and help them and collaborate. So that's what last I heard.
Just a quick time check. We've got about 20 minutes left.
I think I'm going to go quickly through a lot of the next slides so that TJ has an opportunity to talk about some of the initiatives and tools, because I think that's an important part of this conversation as well. So I'll just quickly go through some of the other areas that we think could be good transit centers. So with the next one, West Colfax, there's a couple pockets along West Colfax where near that Denver West intersection, there is some multifamily already. There's a few little pockets, may potentially be redevelopment of office space, maybe have some mixed use in there, who knows? But this could be an area to look at also as you get a little further east on West Colfax near Welchester, the Welchester area, Whiteacres Road. We actually have another zoning that has been approved for mixed use development. Could be an opportunity to look at additional areas in that area. Next slide is talking about the Wheat Ridge Ward Road Station, and that is up near 52nd and Ward. This is an area west of Ward. There are actually a lot of exemptions because there's a lot of industrial, and also there's Drake Middle School, which is exempt. But east of Ward Road, north of 52nd, could be potential where we want to look at increased density. With the next one, we're going to talk about the Jewel Transit Corridor. There's a couple areas, Enclaves and Jeffco. One is Green Gables near Jewel and Wadsworth. We do already have some multifamily in this area as well, where we might be able to look at including some of this as a transit center. And then with the next slide, as we go a little further west, this actually, we need to really take a look at this and see if this is appropriate, because Jewel and Sims, this is the Lockwood area. And it's really a very established single-family detached area. And it may not make sense for it to be a transit corridor. Kind of similar to the next slide, Red Rock Station, the area that is, the dashed line is the Walkshed area. So there is no connection across to the north side of 6th Avenue. So that area on the north side of 6th is actually all exempt. On the south side of 6th, again, you have a very established single-family residential area, 6th Avenue West, that is there. And so we're going to really have to take a close look at this to see, because it may not be a great area. Maybe we can put that density elsewhere. The next slide.
Can I just
Yeah.
say this out loud with this Red Rock Station? There are entities that are discussing a pedestrian bridge over 6th Avenue here, which would change some of that stipulation. I know that RTD is interested, but and I've talked to at least one of the folks who's doing some work in this area. But there's some discussion going on about potentially doing a pedestrian bridge here.
That's good to know. Thank you. On the next slide, some of these areas that may not be as great, maybe we can look at this optional transit area along Southwest Plaza. Southwest Plaza near Bowles and Wadsworth, that is an area that we have already designated in our plans as an activity center. We have been recommending regional mixed use for this area since the plan was last updated in 2011. So it's an area where we want to encourage higher density uses. It has great infrastructure, it has great water and sanitation, it has great services with Clement Park and the Clement Park Library. It's just an area where we have seen some additional apartments infilling some of that commercial space at Bulls Crossing, and then also it hasn't been developed yet, but it was rezoned at Southwest Plaza. So this is an area where I'm really excited because I think we could add density to this area to meet some of those housing goals.
Super quick, do we know if there are any plans by the developer to move forward the rezoning that the Board of County Commissioners did a couple of years ago? Remember those, the housing density that they wanted to bring in, and we thought that was the perfect place for it. Any news on that front? Because I don't think any ground has been broken to date.
I understand that they are still interested in moving forward, but no news, you're right, there hasn't been any progress, on this, and I will pursue that and get back to you.
Just curious.
Yeah, me too.
Because that was very promising in terms of additional units.
Is the gray area, Denver?
So most of it is, it's really hard. So this is a map of zoning. The gray line that kind of cuts through the lake up above, that's Denver. But there is an area right at the corner of Bulls and Wadsworth that looks kind of gray, but that's actually our mixed use zone district. It's just hard to tell the difference between those two grays.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the next slide, I don't know if we need to touch on much, but these were just some other areas that are really exempt. I think the only one I'll talk about is the Arvada Gold Strike Station, because that's kind of one that to me initially seemed like it could be a good transit center, but this is an area where we currently have an IGA with Arvada. In order to promote heavy industrial uses, we need to make sure that there are areas in the county where we can have heavy industrial uses. This is one of those, so they would be exempt. Additionally, there are a couple mobile home parks that are fairly large in this area, so that actually may not be a great area, and a lot of it might be exempt.
They're also redoing that park. It's gonna become a beautiful, new park. They just, I think, approved this, park design through a public vote.
Wow, cool. That's good to know too. So with that, that is the end of my discussion specifically about the transit-oriented communities. And now I was going to turn it over to Tuche to talk about some initiatives and tools that staff has been considering to maybe implement some of the housing needs, not just in these transit-oriented communities, but maybe across the county as a whole.
Dear Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. So far, the need for affordable housing in Jefferson County and ongoing work to resolve this issue has been presented. Now I'm going to give a brief overview of initiatives and possible tools. Our housing strategic plan have been determined several initiatives, and they are fast track, administrative approvals, parking reductions, fee rebates, waivers, density, and height bonuses. And our question now is, how can we implement those initiatives? And staff been exploring regulatory tools to find some answers. Inclusionary zoning and transfer of development rights are one of the tools that we've been exploring. Next slide, please. Inclusionary zoning is a land use policy that requires or encourages developers to include certain percentage of affordable housing units within new residential or mixed-use developments. According to research has been completed by Housing Solutions Lab in 2023, there are over 700 jurisdictions all around the United States has been adopted these policies. High demand in housing and affordability concerns are what they have in common. Next slide, please. There are two types of inclusionary zoning. First one is mandatory. In this one, developers must include affordable housing units, while county are making sure that developers still making a profit. And the other one is voluntary inclusionary zoning. In this one, developers are encouraged to include them in exchange for initiatives like density, bonuses, expedite review, or fee reductions. Next slide, please. Thank you. And the other possible tools is transfer of development rights. This one is not directly connected to affordable housing, but it is a program that allows additional density where community wants to grow in exchange for preservation of sensitive areas that community wants to protect from future development. The tools allows preserving open spaces, cultural landscape, fertile agricultural lands, and avoid development in hazard areas such as wildfire, floodplains, or any geological hazard areas, while concentrating development in places better suited for it, such as transportation-oriented areas that we've been talking about. In next slide, which is our last slide, is so this tool requires the adopted plan that clearly identifies areas for the community, describes to and desires to preserve or protect from developments, and areas where growth and development are encouraged. This is also a market-based tool. And before we end our presentation, I would like to note that, as Heather mentioned, staff is exploring those tools and looking for guidance, and we would love to answer any questions you might have.
I have a follow-up question, and it has to do with data and research that you're looking into. And I was curious to know, the question you put on the table about mandatory and voluntary inclusionary zoning. My gut feeling is that we want to, of course, we want to increase affordable housing, and making it mandatory, we know then we have a certain number of units. But I think we also have to think about the impact on development as well. So what I'm curious to know is, can we look at other similar sized counties to see if policies are in place regarding mandatory and voluntary inclusionary zoning? And I wonder if developers have incentives that are very attractive to them and you have voluntary inclusionary zoning, do you see the same number of affordable housing units going in as you would under mandatory? Because I kind of like the flexibility that comes with voluntary, but when all is said and done, I would love to see a policy that is going to increase affordable housing, and I really love the idea of dispersing it within existing structures. I think that's the right way to do it, in addition to access to transit, corridors, retail, and more. So I'm wondering if you have seen any data, or if we could factor that into some of our research.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I know that TJ has been looking at different jurisdictions. Staff really needs to get back together and discuss among ourselves and come back to you at a later date, but that is a great question. I know that we've looked at other counties, but I'm not sure how similar, we'd have to look at how similar they are in size and figure that out, but that's a great question.
Let's go to Chris and then we'll go to Commissioner Zenzinger.
Okay, I was gonna add that there are a lot of pieces to the puzzle for, especially for the voluntary inclusionary zoning, and some of the things that we're trying to do that TJ pointed out on our first slide, like the fee reduction program, help with that voluntary aspect. If there are other elements that can bring down the cost of building affordable housing, then voluntary becomes more viable.
Right.
And conversely, building off of that point, I think we could also point to evidence that shows when it's mandatory, we don't get the results that we are looking for. And so I would tend to lean on the voluntary more, because I do believe, from what I have heard, that it produces more of the results that we are looking for. But I'm also curious about the timing of this in advance of our ULUC and our Together Jeffco process. So I would tend to lean away from the mandatory inclusionary zoning and lean into the TDR, which, if you think of it as kind of like cap and trade, is a practice that I do believe has yielded some really beneficial results, in particular with some agreements along like Highway 93 and other sensitive spaces that we have wanted to preserve from development, that are just like natural for development because of their positioning, but we also want to be cautious about developing in those areas because of it, so that we can preserve the corridor, the landscapes, or the natural beauty and elements. So I am interested in the TDR, less interested in the mandatory and more interested in the voluntary, just based on some of the surrounding areas that have tried to implement mandatory.
And Commissioner Kurt, any thoughts or additional comments?
I would agree with most of that. I'm less inclined to put the voluntary inclusionary zoning above the mandatory. I see them as both important tools, which I don't think conflicts with what Commissioner Zenzinger said, but I'd probably not necessarily put the voluntary above the mandatory, but definitely the TDR, look at that as an important tool we should move forward with.
And I would agree with the TDR in addition to the comments earlier. I know we're out of time. I just noticed that our 60 minutes also included the two other items that you're presenting as well. This was a great conversation and deeply appreciate the crosswalk because it's no small feat. It's a heavy lift to work through this and to be able to have this continued conversation with you about additional research or data, what you're learning in terms of policy, how that could influence the work that we're doing. It's also especially timely as Commissioner Zenzinger works with Eval and developers at the forum that's coming up. And then also Golden is not the city of Golden, it's Golden United, which has a huge housing advocacy group, is also doing a panel discussion a little bit later this month. So the timing, which is right around the corner now that I stop and think about it, the timing of getting this input is especially helpful for those forums and future community meetings that we have. It's a big issue and certainly something of interest to our community.
One last question.
And we'll take one last question, then we'll close this segment and we'll move on to the two other items.
A couple of slides back, when you were talking about the density requirements, I'm wondering if we've had any discussions or if we're connecting at all with the school district, because some of the neighborhoods that you're mentioning are neighborhoods that recently had school closures. And so we shut down the schools in that area. At the same time, we have to drive for more density, supposedly more affordable housing as well, which implies families. So where are we going to educate these children now that we've shut down their schools? So I would be interested in knowing if we're having good, robust conversations with our school board so that they can also perhaps factor these things into their planning and budgeting.
We've been involved. I've attended tours with Joe Kirby and Kate and others to look at the facilities to see what the best uses might be. I know Kate is planning on a presentation in the future to go over some of those options if she hasn't already. But it is on our radar and something that we're participating in.
And that's for the disposition of properties that have already closed. I'm talking about more forward thinking, which is, should we be closing those schools in the first place if what we are planning for is to increase density and housing in these areas that have experienced recent school closures? And to talk about whether or not the existing schools that are in these areas are, if they're looking to possibly close them. I think that we have information that they may not have around growth and development and future growth and development that could highly impact their decision-making.
I think that's a really good point, a great point. And also, I just want to mention, I'm very excited about the potential with the school in Evergreen that has been closed and what that could mean in terms of affordable housing for aging adults in that community. Thank you all so much for a great conversation today. We really appreciate it, from transportation to housing and so much more. So look forward to more conversations ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Listeners, while they're changing people, I just want to note, this was just supposed to be an information.
Right.
Policies, because we're going to need to give legal advice on the.
Right, and we framed that at the beginning of the
Yeah, yeah, I know.
conversation to be clear that it was informational only. So next up, we've got request for release of airport property from federal obligations at Jeffco Airport Business Center East with Eric Dollar, Airport Director, joining us again along with Develop.
Okay, good morning. My items will be fairly quick.
Okay.
And so both these items kind of roll together. So we'll go through the first one, which is the consideration of requesting for releasing certain airport property from FAA regulations and obligations, such as Airport Business Center East Filing 1, Lot 1. For consideration for purchase by Great Lakes Capital. It would be a process similar to how we released the land for the Verve Industrial Park. And this will allow the airport to sell about 7.2 acres of airport property for this development. We're looking for the Board of County Commissioners to direct airport staff to release this property and authorize paperwork necessary at a future hearing.
Great. Commissioners, do you have any questions on this item?
No questions.
Right. Anyone opposed? All in support?
All right.
Great. Thank you.
So item number 2 is the actual purchase and sale agreement for the land that we were talking about releasing. Great Lakes Capital Health Ventures LLC requests the purchase of a portion of Lot 1, which is the Lot 1 replat A, which is that 7.2 acres. The airport would get about 1.7 million of the $2.2 million for the purchase price of that property. And we're looking for the Board of County Commissioners to authorize that purchase and sale agreement and process paperwork necessary for the completion of the release and that TSA for the property at a future hearing.
Great. Any questions on this one?
No questions.
Everyone in support? Are you good?
Yes.
Okay. All 3 in support.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Next up, we have a presentation on 2 items that our Deputy County Manager, Kate Newman, is going to lead. It's item 1.3. We have 30 minutes allocated for this item. Kate?
Can we switch to 1.3.2 so Chris can?
Sure, just flip flop them?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Chris O'Keefe, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, this is a follow-up, it's a joint effort here.
Okay.
It's a follow-up to the presentation you heard last week on affordable housing and waiving the planning and zoning fees. Because I already had time allotted, I switched it, and we are actually proposing to amend the policy. Chris mentioned this verbally at the end of the presentation last week. It's a request from DOLA, so to meet those, that request and to go forward with waiving certain fees for affordable housing, we'd like to amend the policy. Good?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions on that?
I think we saw the application in real time in our prior presentation, so.
Yeah, okay, then you'll see a future hearing.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, now on to the non-county agency and program funding contract amendments supplemental request. This is a part 3 of the NCAP discussion about restoring some budgets. Since the voters passed ballot measure 1A, we felt more comfortable increasing the budgets towards what they were before. And we did some budget exercises to reduce them in anticipation, but they're no longer necessary. So commissioners did direct that several contracts be increased and that so there were 5 that we're starting with. We're still exploring several other contracts, but the first 5 have been drafted and increased. They are for Action Center, Family.
I'm sorry to interrupt really quick, but just when we say increase, what we mean is we're restoring it to the original level. So it has been increased from that original level,
Correct.
right? Just to clarify?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Adding an additional amount to get it to the 2024 level.
Thank you.
And those 5 contracts that we started with are Action Center, Family Tree, Jefferson Center for Mental Health, Senior Resource Center, and VM Mobility. Back in the budget reduction exercise that I mentioned earlier, it was done at the department bucket level. When it was restored, not all the funding matched. It went to a specific line item, and since then it's been transferred to a different department budget. So we're asking not only to restore those 5 contracts, or in order to restore those 5 contracts, we also need a budget transfer of $145,000 from the commissioner's budget. And again, it's restored, but it would have gone towards this overflow had it all come together in the budget cycle. And we're also asking for a supplemental of $16,140 that we received when the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council was dissolved. We received money back. So we'll need a supplemental to spend that amount that the county received, and also supported the budget transfer from the commissioner's budget into the new line item for NCAP for these 5 contracts.
So Katie, just to clarify, a vote on this would restore the funding to 2024 levels. And then does this also entail the assessments for the 3 NCAP agencies, North Fork Fire, DRCOG, and Foothills Animal Shelter?
Those are also part of the reason that, we'll need a budget transfer is because those came in over, budget. Not over budget, but per the IGA, assessments vary, and it just kind of, we didn't have enough room in the budget for that overage as well as restoring these 5 contracts.
Got it. So this vote or this direction from us would also address that, and then also 10,000 to assist with mock trials.
Oh, and also, there's also 10,000 in the preliminary budget, to help with mock trials.
All right. Any questions, commissioners, on this one? Okay. Everyone in support?
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Kate. Let's go walk us through that. All right. Next up, we have operations and facilities. This item is 10 minutes, and is this all for you, Kate, or
Mark Danner
Mark
is
Danner.
online. The real Mark
The
Danner.
real Mark Danner is joining us this time. As if we missed you during public comment, Mark. Please go ahead.
I could have said something.
We can hear you.
No, I could have said something during public comment, but that wasn't me.
Please go ahead.
Kate, are you taking this or do you want
Yeah, I
to?
thought you would.
Okay.
Either way.
Okay, so this is a really quick, simple one. It's only not 10 minutes. Over a decade ago, the state of Colorado and the courts, we leased just a couple small areas on the first floor of the admin and courts facility for the Office of the State Public Defender. We've just recently had discussions with the public defender, and they no longer use one of the spaces. So this sublease just gets amended to give the county back this a few square feet of the one room that they're not going to be using, and they'll continue to use the other room. So their leased area would change from 759 rentable square feet to 509 rentable square feet. So everyone's on board with this. So it's just a matter of bringing this to the Board of County Commissioners because this is a real property issue.
Questions on that?
This is on the court side?
On the first floor on this side.
On the admin side, yep.
Okay. Do we have any thoughts on what we'd like to do with it or?
Well, it was originally like a janitorial closet. It's not spectacular space. But it'll hold it into the master plan and reevaluated and added to the whole planning.
So if we had a fourth commissioner, that could be their office.
I'm not
Yes.
Yeah, but it'll fold it into the whole space planning allocation and
Any other questions or comments? Future ideas for offices for future commissioners? Okay. Everyone in support?
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next we'll move to perfect timing, by the way. We'll move next to strategy, innovation, and finance. This is our update. We've got a half hour allotted for this item, and I'll turn it over to Dan if we can introduce the team.
Absolutely. Let me unlock my computer and hopefully I can remember my new password and not log out. So it listens to me. Well, first, good morning, commissioners. For those listening online, my name is Dan Conway. I'm the Chief Financial Officer, and with me here are our 3 division directors from SIF. We have Mike Smith, who oversees our strategy, planning, and analysis division. We have Mary O'Neill, who oversees our grants and procurement division, and we have Heather Frizzell, who oversees our finance division. So now that I've got through that, let me unlock my computer.
We're already admiring your first slide. It's great.
Yeah, because why?
What others think we do, what we think.
Oh, that one, yeah, well, yeah. I thought you meant the title slide. I was like,
That's
it's
great.
the title.
Oh, yeah. creative, the second one, when you see it.
First failed
See how
attempt.
many times he has to try.
I am looking forward to Bit's change to moving to a 1-year change in the dialogue. Okay, so if we could go to the next slide, the one that we're looking at. Oh, you already had that. So I'm not sure what other department directors have, the approach they've taken with you would provide the update, but I did want to take the opportunity today to shine a spotlight on a department that, is regularly heard and seen, but I don't think really gets the recognition it deserves. So I'm going to kind of take off the county hat and put on the CIF hat and really kind of brag about our team. So thanks for the time to sit here and listen through what we have to say. I want to point out that we don't save lives. We don't build safe roads. We don't ensure fair elections. We don't protect our natural resources. But without this group of highly educated and dedicated professionals, the county simply could not function. We are essentially the business arm of the county, and we work in the background. We build relationships, and ultimately we thrive on the success of others. Most importantly, we really love what we do. So looking at that slide, what do we do? Well, others think we just control the money like Scrooge McDuck here. Ourselves, we can feel like we spend endless hours navigating an ever-changing maze of rules and regulations. But in reality, what we do is bring all the financial pieces together in collaboration with our partners to support the county. Next slide. So who are we? Well, we have a small but mighty department of around 42 people, and it's organized into 3 divisions. As we just mentioned, we have finance, grants and procurement, and it labels here budget and strategy, otherwise known as strategy plan and analysis, otherwise known as SPA, pick a name. We'll talk a little bit more about each division in a moment, but first I wanted to share with you some of our successes, some of our challenges, and our opportunities as a department. Next slide. Okay, so as a service-oriented organization, we often are focused on the next task in hand and what's on the horizon. We don't really take the opportunity to look back at our achievements. So we have done that, and we compiled quite a list. We didn't put everything on here, but we wanted to pull back a few really important things from the past few years to highlight. So first, in the accounts payable area, with the development and implementation of Workday, we have implemented a huge number of vendor process improvements. This helps with timeliness, accuracy. We've eliminated a large redundancy of outdated information within our budget area, which all 3 are a little bit more familiar with. I'll remind you that we helped guide our countywide budget reduction exercise. That was inclusive, it was comprehensive. At the same time, from the beginning all the way until today, we've helped steer that 1A process, going through the evaluation, exploring concepts, all the way up to today. And through that, we had to develop multiple budgets. In fact, last year we had to develop 3 simultaneously, which was quite a lift. And I think that's a pretty significant achievement that shouldn't be overlooked. We recently updated and automated our mill levy certification process to eliminate any type of error or oversight. And while doing all of this, I want to point out that the budget team has received yet again the Government Finance Officers Award for Excellence in Budget Reporting, as well as the finance team. I think it's been 38 consecutive years that they've received that award for the comprehensive financial report. Within our finance area, our internal auditor particularly has really engaged in some really comprehensive petty cash and cash equivalent audits. That's going around all the county and finding out all of our little petty cash and cash drawers and making sure that we're complying with those standards. This team has implemented numerous standards and quality control efforts, and that simply can't be overlooked. Our grants team, another area you're pretty familiar with, but we essentially created a whole new team. We didn't have that before the CARES came about. We created a team from the ground up, and through it have provided high success in managing and spending down those awards, both the ARPA and the CARES Act, bringing in collaboration with all of our stakeholders, establishing processes along the way, provided that general oversight. It's been a significant achievement that we need to look back and celebrate. Payroll. Now, we have implemented a lot of streamlined processes to process our payroll. Payroll is kind of like IT. If there's nothing wrong, nobody notices. But we have over 3,000 employees, and they all have different pay structures, different compensation arrangements, their benefits, and everybody gets paid every pay period, week in and week out, year after year. And I think we need to implement a program to go hug a payroll account. Everybody gets paid. So I think that is something that's we expect and we should not take for granted. They do a fantastic job. And then our procurement team, they have made tremendous strides. They have been holding open houses on a regular basis. They send out newsletters. They provide you training and resource tools like job aids. Recently been updating our policies and procedures around that, and also increase the use of our master contracts to limit kind of one-off. So I just wanted to kind of highlight just some really important successes that aren't necessarily as sexy as some of those other departments I had mentioned before.
Dan, before you move on, I'd just like to interject a reminder that while all of this was occurring, commissioners, we also had a change of our chief financial officer. And so I just share that because obviously that creates a gap, a hole. And so during at least 4 months, if not more, of last year, there was a gap. Dan stood in the gap as the interim chief financial officer, and Mike stepped into the gap in the budget and strategy area. But I think it's pretty phenomenal when we change such a significant leadership position and we continue to operate the business, and that the 3 budgets cannot be underscored enough. The amount of work that the entire team did to not only do the reduction budget, but the continuation budget. And I've been really impressed, and they're spinning a lot of, or the plate's spinning, on the pole. There's a lot of that goes on daily that most of us don't see. So just wanted to underscore that I think it was even a heavier lift because of our change in CFO and having that gap.
Thanks for saying that, Joe. Appreciate it. So let's go to the next slide. So at the same time, we do continue to face some challenges. And so these are some items we wanted to bring to your attention, not to elicit pity or just trying to provide a list of complaints. Really to set expectations that we too experience some barriers that adversely impact our work. So first is, and a lot of these kind of build off this first one, but lack of role clarity. So we have a lot of decentralized functions, financial functions. We have accountants in our division, we have accountants in other departments, we have budget staff in our department, and we have it in others. And so there's often lack of clarity about who's doing what piece of what process. And we've improved that over time, but that still continues to be an issue. That kind of speaks to lack of standardization. So those shared processes. I think that's more prevalent when we look to non-county manager departments, elected official departments. They, often will kind of go their own direction. We'll do our best to help them through the process, but we don't often have the same processes. There's a lack of standardization.
Can I just ask about that? Because that has been an ongoing challenge for us for a whole host of reasons. And some we can address, others can be a little bit more challenging. I'll put it that way. Have you observed any models that or policies that other counties have put in place to help with some of this and get us closer to where we need to be?
Well, I think that's the big part of it is policy. So if we get a more robust policy structure that we have all organizations agree to comply with, I think that's a little bit better footing. When I've asked around to get the other 10 large counties, most of the time I kind of get a tilted head and it's like, well, it's just our culture. That's just what we do. So it's very informal. So it's, to me, kind of the root of a cultural issue, but I think policy is probably the first direction towards that.
Well, I think that's a really good point though about the culture piece. And I know, Joe, as someone who's had experience in other counties and with cities, you've also observed that. So we don't have to take the time to talk about that now in more depth, but certainly something to swing back to and talk further.
Now, I want to be clear to say that we really have good partnerships. I think our current elected officials are doing a great job. They really do work with us well. That statement is probably more of over time, over history, we've had some of those challenges, but there's still some of that remnant. And I think with standardization, I want to highlight, and you've probably heard me say this before, and I'll keep saying it. I think the conversation has been brought up about centralization versus decentralization. To me, the question is standardization. If you have everybody following the same process, it doesn't matter who does it or where it's done, but standardization to me is the key. We do experience an imbalance between accountability and authority. And this is really kind of an underlining thing that I've seen since I've been with the county, is that oftentimes we'll see financial staff being asked to hold others accountable for what they do, even though we have no authority over what they do. So it kind of comes down to that role clarity. So I'm not sure the answer to that, but it is a present reality that we continue to navigate. It's gotten better with close partnerships. But oftentimes it's like, well, it's SIF's job to make that decision. Like, well, no, it's actually you're as a leader of that particular department decision. So sometimes we have some of that back and forth. I think you've heard some of these things with even HR, that their role clarity with who's doing what. So that's unique, not unique to us, but it's definitely present. We have competing interests in a resource scarce environment. Again, that's not unique to us, but just as a microcosm, as an example, since taking this role, I kind of struggle with, do we use the resources we have to recruit and hire qualified staff? Or do I take those dollars to place on training for existing staff to make sure that their accreditations are up to speed and they're getting resources they need to keep up to speed? What's the trade-off there? So that makes it really difficult. I think what that speaks to is for far too long, I think this department has been so outward focused. Our job is to help others. And I've been guilty of doing that myself, that we kind of ignore our own needs and we haven't championed our own needs enough. I think it's kind of resulted in us kind of being behind the eight ball in a lot of areas. And that speaks to our pay equity. One of the things I've been discovering is that we have several staff in our department that have the same title, same job description, pay code as others in another department, and those other departments pay more. And I would argue that we have a greater and broader responsibility than those. So that's kind of a strange imbalance that we are continuing to have conversations with HR. We know there's an overall county-wide compensation concern, but it's become a little bit more obvious as I'm taking on this role, seeing where we have these gaps. With that, we have an increased workload without new resources. An example we put up there is the EO task force. Now, while the team has been great taking on that role, new projects come up a lot, but we don't necessarily get new resources to handle those additional workloads. I think we have, as a county, taken greater strides the last probably 6-7 months, particularly like around this wildfire. We had those service groups say, no, we need this administrative support to go with it. That's kind of a new development that we haven't done traditionally in the county. And I think our department's been subject to that, not stepping up to say we need support services to go along with these initiatives. And of course, the never ending new accounting standards that come down. GASB, I think when I started, was probably only in the 80s. Now we're at 103. So they're extensive, rigid, standard rules that we have to comply with. The latest is, we mentioned here, leases and subscription-based information technology arrangements. I think it's SBITAs, crazy names. But those rules really impact how we do our business. We have to create new policies, new procedures, change our systems, and they come down year after year. So those are some of the challenges that shape our reality. Okay, so next slide, please. Now, despite some of those challenges, we do continue to look ahead and embrace opportunities to improve. And some of these are some of the areas that we are focusing on and frankly very excited about. We're looking to leveraging Power BI for more automation. We've already done that with some of our online dashboards, some of our internal processes, but we're starting to see the power, no pun intended, of leveraging that platform to really help automate our process. Workday helps us enable us to do that a lot more than ever before. We continue to look at policy and procedure updates. You know, we have quite a selection, and Kate just emailed me this morning about a bunch more that we need to look through. So we do have a regular cycle to look through and update those because as every operational function changes, we have to look and see how it impacts our fiscal policies. We're looking to really coordinate our grant lifecycle management. So as Marion's team moves away from just focusing on ARPA, we're looking towards that larger presence for managing our county grant effort from start to finish. And so that is an opportunity that we're really looking forward to. And with 1A passed, we're now able to pursue more grant resources. So even more important for us to have that coordinated centralized function. With that too, we're also looking at diversifying revenue streams. You've probably heard me say it before. I'm sure you'll appreciate we're overly dependent on property taxes as a county, and thus it creates an undue burden, an imbalanced burden on our property taxpayers. We need to look at other revenue streams, whether that's different user fees, debt instruments like bonds, whatever it may be. We now have an opportunity to pursue those where we didn't have before, and I think that's a great opportunity. Having a diversified revenue stream makes us more resilient to the unstable landscape that we're navigating. With that also,
Dan,
yeah.
can I ask a quick, if we were to find, explore and adopt some other type of revenue source to continue diversifying, are there tools in our tool belt where we can then lower our county's property taxes if we're raising it somewhere, if we're finding sources somewhere else that we could lower our property taxes to offset where we would be collecting it?
Yeah, that's a tool that we've actually leveraged in the past years when we're trying to hit the Tabor target. We would do a temporary mill levy adjustment, and that's still available to the board in the future should you so see fit. In fact, that had been used years ago, probably 20 years ago. The board had voluntarily lowered the temporary mill levy reduction to start to spend down the fund balance of the general fund, which is kind of had the inverse effect, but that is a function that's still available.
Great, thank you.
Sounds like that weather's moving in. Just got a notification.
I didn't know if we're getting a drone parade.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're also looking at how we can leverage more AI integration tools in Workday. Workday is a really robust and responsive network that's allowing us to utilize those AI tools. We're working closely with BIT to see what things are available there. Procurement process improvements and training. So while the team has made some strides in that area, we're looking to make a lot more strides working closely with Marion to help improve that process countywide. We're also looking to standardize, increase our standardization for quality control. I referred to that earlier. More standardization, the more quality control we'll have. And then strengthening our partnerships. That is our key mantra, is that we are not gatekeepers, we're not watchdogs, we're partners with folks. Our job is to make others succeed. So that's what we're continuing to strive for. Slide. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about each division. I think we're still okay on time. Yes?
Yep, you're doing great.
So the finance division, here we have kind of the functions that each area or each team within the finance division focuses on. Accounts payable, receivable. So this is all the money that comes in or out of the county. It's going to handle all of the invoicing, setting up all the vendor arrangements, which is a huge lift, all their 1099 forms, unclaimed properties, people don't cash their checks, all that, processing of payments. Then we have our general accounting. So while all those dollars are going in and out the door, we also have to make sure we're reconciling all those dollars, make sure we're reporting it, making sure that we're on top of our capital assets. We manage the inventory for that. And so it also handles the monthly reconciliation cost points. Financial reporting is a big aspect as well. This helps prepare the annual comprehensive financial report, which is a major lift. And Heather's right on the verge of completing this year, so she's going to sigh a relief on that and making sure that we're compliant.
I have a quick question
Yeah.
about that. So I've heard some criticism in the community that we are not as transparent with our financial reporting. Are there Could you maybe highlight some of the ways that we do that in response?
Well, I'm not sure what particularly those, comments
The
are coming
comments I
from.
heard was, we don't put our checkbook on the website.
So, we do post all of our transactions, in paper. Is that what we posted?
Yeah, we post all of our like actual checks in the paper every week. And then we've been looking at how to get it back on the website. We had some issues with like redacting information, and so we're still exploring that. And it's still a project in the works so that we can get to online. But we are meeting all requirements with the paper, issuing that. But yes, we would like to get back to the online.
And we used to have that when we were on JD Edwards, because we had a way to export that and redact it. When we moved over to Workday, it became a little more difficult, so that is still what we're looking. We don't want to put household information out there or, privileged payee information, so that's definitely something we're working on.
Yeah, and mostly because we transitioned to Workday, and so now we're dealing with the new system, but it is a project we have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I mentioned payroll, all the time sheets, all the time cards, the changes. They really do a great job working with supervisors and staff to help with those nuances. And they also have the internal audit team. I mentioned the controls that works to develop and establish compliance. And then we have a dedicated Workday effort. Workday really has two heavy components. That's the human capital aspect of it, on the HR side, and then we have the finance side. So Heather's team does a great job navigating all the process. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about grants management team. That's one of the teams under Mary. And along with managing the programs under ARPA and the Rescue Plan Project Fund, this grants team is transitioning to focusing on these four key areas: grant acquisition, grant compliance, general oversight of county grants, and special projects, such as like the executive order task force. Grant acquisition is just what it sounds like. It helps. Let's go look at those opportunities to secure grants. And that's a kind of an art or of a science. You have to know how to write grants and applications. So we have a great resource here. Grant compliance. Once you get the grants, go and make sure that we're reporting it, we're spending it within the time frame. We have sub-recipient monitoring. Pass those dollars on to another recipient. We have to make sure that they're compliant. It's a pretty heavy lift to make sure that that's going forward. And then providing that overall oversight across the county. What resources are available, live reviews, making sure that we're not conflicting with each other, have multiple groups applying for the same grant. So that's a huge coordination effort there. And then the special projects. And we listed a few here. We mentioned the EO task force, but we also have the state and district funding. We serve as a fiscal agent for several initiatives. So this team really helps coordinate and keep track of those efforts, which is no small lift. Not to mention congratulate Judge Spending.
I'm sorry, is the opioid council included in that?
So we're working with
Specific,
the
or is that-
opioid council. We have Dr. Shore, who's
Yeah.
the lead with that, but our team interfaces with her.
Who's
very
the
closely.
fiscal agent, right?
Right.
That's no small lift either.
Okay, let's talk about SPA. This is the team that Mike currently oversees. Again, you have more interface with this group through all of our numerous budget discussions, probably more so than you want, but you can't get rid of us.
Never.
But there's really much more to it than just what you're seeing. There's on a daily basis, this team really, aside from helping all the departments and offices develop the budget, they help with the tracking, making sure that we're staying within those budget limits, providing education on how the process works, helping with forecasting and tracking. We also have a strategic planning effort. Now, years past, we didn't really have a identified strategic effort. We brought and created this role where Mike has assumed to help steer and guide that strategic plan we developed. I think the last time was 22. But it also helps coordinate how we align all of our long-term plans. The CIP process is an example of that. So we have a strategic presence there. It's not necessarily a budget presence. And then financial reporting. We mentioned a little bit under the finance team, but we have to think about all the calculations we have to do. We have to calculate our revenue limits. We have to distribute our highway user tax fund dollars to the state. We have to distribute revenues that we have to share with our community partners. And probably more significantly, we have to manage our countywide cost allocation plan, which is an exercise that it's difficult to navigate, but I think we really do a really good job at it. So that's a quick look at SPA. And then the last group is another one under Marion, that's the procurement team. So, you know, purchasing remains a nuanced and very complex service area that many people don't quite adequately understand. I think the team has made some strides to educate and empower our partners, but I will be working closely with Mary and the purchasing to further improve that service delivery area and really enhance that critical function to keep the county business running. And it's kind of broken down to the three areas. Really has it right now a presence of focus on customer assistance, helping people navigate a complex system, helping everybody prepare their procurement documents, their contracts, their templates, identify best practices, and then the actual transaction goes. So this is kind of grossly oversimplifying procurement, probably an hour presentation on itself, but that's a highlight of the service provided by that area. Okay, this is the last slide. I just wanted to wrap up today with a recap of what we do. So these are kind of your sound bites, if you will. We ensure financial transactions are recorded accurately and consistently in alignment with new standards. Through strong internal current customer service and consistent accounting, we build trust, improve efficiency, and support transparency. We create capacity through efficient use of resources, oversee compliance, and deliver services more effectively. We streamline our policies and procedures to enhance efficiency and effectiveness in our operations. We provide centralized support to county departments and offices to manage the grant lifecycle from application to management to grant closeout with clear communication and accuracy. We maximize grant opportunities for the benefit of the county and the community. We ensure public funds are managed responsibly in alignment with county and community priorities. We promote accountability and ensure that financial decisions are open and understandable. We work with departments to align funding with priorities and ensure resources are used efficiently to best serve the community. We ensure long-lasting, cost-effective goods and services are procured that reduce waste, support efficient service delivery. We maximize the value of taxpayer dollars, promote efficient, responsible use of limited resources, and we recruit and develop highly talented and dedicated professionals to ensure timely, accurate, and efficient financial services, support our community partners, and their incredibly important work. Last slide. Thanks for your time and willingness to listen to this, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I just want to give you all a huge thanks on behalf of the board for the work that you do, because we absolutely could not do this work if we just come full circle to the comment that you made earlier, Dan. And there have been so many moving parts, whether it's the state cuts, what we're facing at a federal level with potential funding losses, the great work of the EO committee. And one of the things that I appreciate is that this team has always been nimble, whether it's COVID or this issue, and we also see that across our other divisions as well. But I want to just give a shout out to you for the work that you do on this front. It really does make a difference. And I think it's reflected in the national awards and recognition that you also receive year to year. So thanks for that. Commissioners, any questions or any comments? Or we move next to commissioner reports, and then after commissioner reports and reports from our county manager and attorney, we'll go to a quick lunch break before exec session.
Do I have any other questions? Just thank you very much for all your work, and thanks for keeping us updated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Appreciate it. Next up, commissioners, do you have any reports this morning you want to share?
Do not.
Commissioner Sensen? I'll do just a quick little footnote for you. We had talked about doing an Engage Jeffco article that I was up for this month that talks about SNAP and Medicaid. So I did submit that, drawing heavily from our resolutions to Cassie and Jeremy, and I think it's already up on the website. So know that much of it was drawn from the letters that were prepared by our amazing team, and then also plugged at the very end our website where people can get continued information. So that was done yesterday. County Manager.
Commissioners, just want to recognize my administrative team. Jeannie has been working hard on cross-training to create more depth on the bench. So you've seen Mary Kay, as well as Judy joining us more frequently to make sure that we have backup when we didn't before. So Jeannie, thank you. Thanks to Judy and Mary Kay for their willingness to take on additional responsibilities.
Thank you very much. Keeping us on the straight and narrow. Thank you.
No reports, but we do have an exec session if you would like me to tee that up for you.
Please.
May I please have a motion to go into executive session for purposes of discussing 3 child egregious harm, near fatality, or fatality investigation report reviews, which are confidential pursuant to CRS 246402-4C, based on the confidentiality provisions contained in 26-1-1395E, as well as the privilege provided under 26-1-1395D. A purchase and sale agreement for 5079 State Highway 93 for legal advice and advice to negotiators under 24-6-4024B and 4E. And then finally, the regular general litigation update for purposes of legal advice under 24-6-4024B.
I move we go into executive session for the reasons outlined by the county attorney.
Second.
Anyone opposed? All right, we'll move into executive session. We'll take about a 10-minute break, give or take, for everyone to grab their lunch, and then we'll have a working lunch through exec session. As we normally do, and that'll give us some time to switch over to.